Hi, welcome in, everybody. I'm Clayton Gullett, your host today of Executive Sessions, and thank you for joining us for episode 2 in a fabulous series. I'm joined today by the lovely Jordan Gabbert, a senior associate in investor relations and valuations, and also an upcoming Mongolian throat singer, if I've ever heard one. And to my right, I am joined by Alicia Motomura, the VP, yes, the VP of operations, and also a massively renowned salsa dancer. Thank you both for coming in and joining us today on the show. How are you?
We're good. How are you?
Oh, I'm living the dream. I'm living the dream every day. So today, these two have been chosen because of their dynamic backgrounds, their experience, and everything that they're able to bring to the table for MiddleGround. So jumping right in, they both have such a unique history. Jordan and Alicia both have such a unique history, and I want to dive into that first. So who wants to go first? Let's jump in with you. Yeah. Jordan, tell us about your history. Like, how did you get involved in industrial manufacturing? Like, what's your story?
Yeah, so my story is I'm originally from here, the Lexington area. I went to undergraduate at University of Kentucky. I got my double major in accounting and management. So really, while I was going to school, I was looking for internships and ended up finding an opportunity right here in Lexington with Parker Hannifin. They have their O-ring division location here in the area. So I started there as an accounting intern throughout my last year during school. And before I even graduated, I had the opportunity to get a full-time job offer with their accounting training management program and go throughout like different locations throughout the U.S. and really just learn from their manufacturing facilities in the more accounting department aspect.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. So while I was there right out of school, I think my first rotation was in like Ravenna, Ohio, and then I ended up going to Stafford, Texas. They wanted to send me, my next rotation was supposed to be in like Hollis, New Hampshire, which was going to be in January. And I was like, nope, way too cold. That's not the area.
Texas to New Hampshire.
Yeah, a little too far northeast for me. And so then I started looking for an opportunity a little bit closer to home. You know, really wanted to be closer to Kentucky where most of my family is located at. So I was lucky to find an opportunity with Conagra Foods as a cost accountant and ended up working my way up to a senior financial analyst in their Louisville, Kentucky manufacturing location. So what's really cool about that location is they manufactured the McDonald's biscuits, pancakes, oatmeal.
Wow. Okay,
so I learned a lot about hotcakes, a lot about biscuits. I used to be able to tell you every single thing about how to make them, but it's been a minute.
Did you stay like hungry all the time? Because I feel like it would be really hard.
I always volunteered with R&D, made sure they were my best friends.
Right.
So yeah, definitely volunteered for all the taste testing.
Yeah.
But one thing they don't tell you is if you have like a hotcake testing or for the biscuits especially, they don't have like an egg or a sausage to go with it. You just get a biscuit. So.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, so I was heavily involved with the manufacturing location there. Again, I was in the accounting department, but I was doing a lot of the cost accounting, bill of materials. So an important part of my position there was to really understand how the manufacturing floor was running from a cost aspect.
Okay.
And then also cost savings initiatives there and just really kind of defining that from what the opportunity is and then how much money we should pretty much see as an end result.
Oh, wow.
But so I was there for about 4 or 5 years, I believe, with Conagra. And then, you know, Louisville being still super far away to Lexington, over an hour drive.
Oh, yeah.
But decided, you know, I wanted to still get a little bit closer to home. So I ended up reaching out to a recruiter back then to help me find, you know, hopefully another accounting or finance position in the Lexington area. And long and behold, you know, met with a recruiter. Before I knew it, walking out of that office, I had an offer to be a financial recruiter.
Oh, my gosh.
So just definitely.
Right out the gate?
Yeah, pretty much. So saw an opportunity to get a different aspect and kind of skill set that I didn't have just with kind of numbers crunching and manufacturing, and what better way to really get to know a bunch of different industries and build your network than kind of become a financial recruiter. So I did that for 4 or 5 years there here in Lexington. But what I really learned in that role, it wasn't necessarily manufacturing, but it was people building skills and building that trust with individuals. You know, one of the hardest things is moving jobs. So you're helping people do one of the hardest things they'll probably ever have to do in their life too. It's just figuring out if they want to make a job move. And is it right for their family, themselves, and their career? So really just guiding them through that. And then on the flip side, working with companies and executives on helping them, you know, find that right hire for them. So
absolutely,
a lot of moving pieces.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
But, you know, after 2020, COVID hit, found myself, you know, not a lot of people are hiring, which is unfortunate during COVID. So I found myself looking for a new opportunity. So again, reached out to a recruiter saying, hey, you know, I'm in the job market looking for an opportunity. I was very open to either going back to accounting or finance, open to industries. You know, I have recruiting experience as well, but I was presented with an opportunity to join MiddleGround Capital. Didn't really know much at the time about private equity or MiddleGround, but got an offer to join the team, the operations team, as an associate. So joined in August of 2020 and really haven't looked back since. So went back to kind of my roots of accounting and finance within the manufacturing realm and cost savings and initiatives. So it's been exciting. So.
Is that where you feel most at home, as far as like crunching numbers or?
You know, what we do here at MiddleGround, it's definitely a little bit of both. Crunching numbers, but you have to build relationships with people to really have your number crunching have an impact on where you need it to go. So
right.
It's a little bit of both, the relationship aspect and numbers.
Just out of curiosity, you know, I mean, to walk in and sit down and talk to a recruiter and say, you know, hey, I'm looking for a job, you know, right out the gate, you know, kind of going back a little bit, and then to be offered that job, you know, you have to be able to sell. And it seems like that's not been any issue for you at all. Would you say that there's been any sort of like, was there anybody like growing up that you were like, oh, you know, like my mom or my dad was like, you know, an avid, you know, salesman or anything like that? Where do you think that you got that from?
I don't know if it's because I don't think I'm a natural salesman. I just think, you know, I come from a family that's pretty confident in who they are and what they do. And I think I display kind of that whenever I go into a meeting or an interview. Like I know what skill set I bring to the table. So just, I think displaying that confidence is part of it. But
well, I mean,
no natural salespeople in my background that I know of.
Oh, really? Well, that's okay. Well, so what would you say up to this point? You know, you've had quite the career already. You're very young. I mean, you're coming out the gate, and you have quite the job experience. What do you think is the most important factor to your success? I mean, you've mentioned confidence, but I mean, is there anything else that you attribute that to, or?
I would probably say, you know, a lot of it is just who you surround yourself with. But then also, too, I feel like I've been pretty consistent and reliable in, you know, trying to present my best work at the end of the day. And no matter what I do, I'm going to always try to see through what I can. And if I don't know something, like, I'm not afraid to raise my hand and ask a question or get some advice or guidance where needed. But I think another thing, too, is just I try with whoever I'm working with, whether it's a coworker or somebody else, an individual at a portfolio company or a third party, just building that relationship and that trust aspect too. So I think once you kind of build that and trust, it can take you a lot further.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I was always, I think attitude definitely also plays a part. I mean, you know, the listeners at home don't necessarily know this too much, but you know, we meet beforehand, you know, for these podcasts, and it's been a pleasure, you know, getting to know you, and I really think attitude definitely goes a long way with that. Yeah. You know, I was always told growing up, you will attract more flies with honey than you will with vinegar.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that makes a big difference. You know, diving in, while I'm also on that, Alicia. Hi.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
I want to know your story.
Well, my story is a little bit different than Jordan's. I was born in Ohio, so just north, you know, up I-75. And I was a mom at 17. And so had no real plans to, you know, get into manufacturing. And I was attending community college right out of high school. To be a nurse, actually, and was just struggling to pay my bills. And my mom was working in a factory at the time, and so I got a job at where she was working. as a press operator.
That's really cool.
So yeah, it was a small Canadian company. At the time, it was called Jet Composites. It's no longer in business. And they made thermal and acoustical barriers, so hood insulators, dash insulators. Yeah, crazy enough, we were running this material, which was like resignated cotton. They had like all these warning labels all over it saying like known to cause cancer in the state of California.
God. Oh,
but apparently it was okay to produce in Ohio, but yeah.
Well, it's different out there. You know?
Yeah, and so that's where I started. And from there, there was an opportunity that opened up in quality as a quality technician. And pretty much I applied for the job and I got it because I did have some college. And but basically I was just taking care of the whole area and doing in-process checks. So it wasn't a big job, but it was, getting me closer, I guess, to where I would end up. And then a little while after that, a quality engineer position opened up. And at the time, they were having trouble filling it. And I just was like, hey, I'm already here. I'm already doing some of the work. Why don't you just let me do it and fill in until, you find someone. And so I was pretty convincing, charming probably at the time with the quality manager. And he was like, okay, sure. But don't get too comfortable because we're going to fill this job. I just worked really hard and they never ended up filling it. So I moved right into the quality engineer position at that point.
Very cool.
And from there, was there for a bit and decided it was time to get out of the small town that I was from. And so at the time, Monster.com was a really big search engine for jobs. I don't even know if it exists anymore, but...
Yeah, I've heard of Monster in a few years.
Yeah, I know.
It's been a hot minute,
It's been a minute,
Yeah. And so I went on and literally I was applying for jobs all over the country. Anywhere that was like quality engineer, I was like,
really?
Yes. And I got a call from a company out of Battle Creek, Michigan. So it was a stamping plant for Flexingate, and they were looking for a supplier quality engineer. And so I moved up there, packed up my son and a friend, and we all moved up. And worked there for a couple years, and then spent a short period of time with a contract house doing supplier readiness for General Motors, and then ended up going to another stamping facility that is owned by Shape Corporation up in the Spring Lake, Grand Haven, Michigan area.
Oh, okay.
As a quality engineer. And then I ended up moving to Bentler Automotive in the Kalamazoo, Michigan area in quality, and spent about close to 12 years there.
Okay.
Started in quality, then moved into continuous improvement and program management. Decided after spending so much time fixing things with continuous improvement that, maybe I would try launching something, right? And if we could fix some problems up front, then we could save ourselves a lot of headache once we went into production. So I did that for a couple years, and then we were closing a facility and was going to need a lot of work to prepare the plant to insource this from another facility. So they asked me to go and take that position back to another location, and we did that. So we were bringing in some tubular door beams, and yeah, the rest is history. I at the time there, I got a call from a guy that I used to work with that had moved on to another company, Mobea, and they were looking to start up their continuous improvement. And he asked me if I was interested, and the job was in Florence, Kentucky, which got me much closer to home. And, when you're like 22, you're like, how do I get out of this little town? But when you get old, you're like, how do I get closer to home so I can spend time? How do I get closer to home? My grandparents were aging and passing, and my parents too. And so I ended up going to Mobea and started up their CI for North America. Did that for about a year and a half, and then moved into head of quality and lean, eventually taken the director of quality and lean for their 9 North American locations. So I had responsibility for plants here in U.S. as well as Mexico, and spent, I was there about eight years. So 6 of them was in quality and lean. And then the last 2 years, I moved into a general manager position. So over their North America powertrain division. So I was responsible for sales, engineering, and operations for several other business units.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it's fair to say that maybe you've worked a job or two in your
maybe.
It sounds like it blows my mind. Starting at the bottom, and then like literally, you were going to school for nursing. You were crunching numbers. You were like, this isn't working. This isn't paying the bills. You were a mother at 17, and then ever since then, you were like, okay, hey mom, I'm coming to work at that factory, and we're gonna kick ass. And you have been doing that for years, and it is. it's I don't know. It's just really cool to see that hard work, does pay off, but I mean, talking about being on the shop floor and starting out from there, that's kind of where I wanted to go next with this, which was, what is, and this is open to either of you at this point, based off both of your experiences, what is the importance of the shop floor for a company? Because I feel like so many companies don't really realize, yeah, they're like, well, X, Y, and Z, yeah, this is where we make our product. But the people on those floors that are doing those jobs, what do you all think from your experience is the importance of that?
Well, that's where the magic happens. I mean, you have engineers, you have designers, right, that spend months and even years coming up with a concept, not only for a product, but then how do you manufacture it? And it doesn't happen until it's actually, installed on a production floor and you get people behind it and they start making parts. And so, that's the beginning, of actually being able to produce something that you sell to a consumer.
Right.
Yeah, and I think for like the average consumer as well, it's so easy for us to just go to the grocery store or go to a car dealership or to a store and be like, oh, I want this product, or I'm going to put this in my cart, and online shopping and Amazon will have it to you in 2 days. Yeah. But I think as a consumer, you kind of forget, well, where does that come from? What is the beginning of the story? Well, the shop floor is where that product is eventually even thought of or created. So one of the things when I got into manufacturing that I loved was actually seeing something being made from start to finish, and all of the hands-on deck that there is, and the cool equipment or machinery, no matter how old it is, that will make a product. And you're like, oh, that's how that gets made. That you never really even think of, whether it's food or, aluminum stamping or anything like that. So
it's always so cool to see some of these machines and just the people who are running them, who've done it for years. I used to work at the refinery in Catlettsburg for Marathon, and my dad was there for 47 years. And it was so cool just to kind of go out in the plant and to see these guys or women out in these different jobs, and they would be, they'd take a valve apart, they'd break everything down and for the production of crude, and then they would put everything back together, and they'd be working with stuff like HF, sulfuric acid and so on and so forth. And it's just it's another day at the office, it's no big deal. It's oh my God.
Yeah. It's kind of mind blowing to us as consumers, but to them it's they are the expert of that, and
absolutely,
everything that goes into it and why, and the bill of materials.
So how do you all think that leadership plays a role in shaping the shop floor? Because I feel like if you've got the right leadership behind you, this isn't my specialty, but from what I've seen in those jobs, when we've had a good manager, production and everybody's mentality is a lot better versus somebody who has management that say necessarily don't care. And they're well, you're easily replaceable.
Yeah. Well, there's managers that are both, who do both of that, right? Those that really care and those that don't, to be honest.
Right.
From my perspective, the one thing that, I took with me is I remember being a press operator. I remember, having a problem or hearing a sound of equipment that was rattling or a part that wasn't coming out right. And I remember being hey, there's something wrong here. And being surrounded, by management or engineers that was oh, she doesn't know what she's talking about. And, sure, of course, probably I didn't know how to fix it, but I knew there was a problem. And so because I came from the shop floor, I know the value and the credibility of the shop floor personnel. And so if the first thing I do when I get on a shop floor, any shop floor, is I go talk to the people. They're the ones that have a lot better idea of what's happening on that production floor than even the supervisor or the engineer or even the plant manager for that matter.
Absolutely. Jordan, did you notice anything throughout your experience where did you ever see a teachable moment where a shop hand or somebody on the floor was able to show management something and kind of open their eyes and kind of get them jarred loose out of their way of thinking? Or
oh yeah, multiple times. For example, when I worked back in one of my first positions at Conagra Foods, every single week the management team, which somehow I was kind of included in, was doing weekly Gemba walks, and we our task was just solely going out to the shop floor and asking the individuals that were working the machinery just questions on why they were doing something. And really, I, as a newer individual, not only in my career but in that position as well, I started out with the basics. Why do you do that? and then, well, why do you do that? If you just kind of simply ask who, what, when, where, why, and how, you really can open up to a lot of different ideas and areas of improvement that, management might not be able to see on a day-to-day basis. But just simply asking those questions, never assuming that it's already being done, really opened management's eyes just in that aspect.
I always think that it's important for anyone to be able to stand back, even if you're an expert in the field, just to go back and ask questions. And I feel both of you definitely strike me, especially from the conversations I've had with you outside of this room, as two very educated people who know without a doubt, like, if you don't know the answer, you know how to go find it, either whether that's going and talking to somebody on the shop floor, whether that's, doing research or relying on past experience. But, working on both sides, Alicia, specifically, this is for you, working on both sides, what lessons have you learned? You talked about, pulling from different experiences in the past. What lessons have you taken from working on the floor to management and throughout your career, would you say?
Well, because, you're starting the production floor and you're trying to get into the front office, or you're trying to get into management. I think a lot of my career, I was just trying to build some credibility. And so I was kind of a late bloomer. I started and stopped. I talked about going to community college right out of high school, right? But I didn't get my bachelor's degree until I was almost 40. And so, I had to work really hard, and I had to surround myself with really smart people that I could learn from. And I had to have a good attitude and just be tenacious, not giving up. And I think that those were all attributes, right, that really helped me get from, the shop floor to have a chance as a quality technician all those years ago, to what perhaps, Scott Duncan saw when he interviewed me for the role at MiddleGround, right? So it's just that history and the consistency of bringing those attributes, to the job regularly.
Absolutely. So Jordan, the same question to you. I mean, what takeaways have you kind of pulled from your education or from, just your various job experiences? What have you kind of pulled away and taken into your current position?
Yes, I would say most of it I would say has come from just learning from others in the various job positions that I've had so far. But really, two of the biggest takeaways for me are, one, just treating every single person with the same respect, and being able to talk to individuals no matter what level they are in an organization. If you are somebody working the shop floor, or if you are high up in a C-level position, I think that has always, the same respect no matter what position. And then second is, one thing I've learned, especially in this position here at MiddleGround and working closely with the portfolio companies, I tend to get a lot further with building relationships and individuals if I explain why we're doing something, instead of just like trying to say we're going to do it because that's what we say we're going to do. But typically, if you explain to somebody like why we're going to go out and look for efficiencies on the shop floor, or why we're going to look at the material flow a different way. Yes, it's been working, but what if it could work better, and provide X, Y, and Z opportunities for your employees? Typically, those people are like, okay, that sounds good, and they're going to be more on your side and help you implement what you need to do.
Would you say that attitude and perspective play a key role in that when it comes to meeting with all of these individuals and trying to learn the processes?
What do you mean by perspective in that question?
Well, the perspective more so from a shop hand, because, I mean, depending on what kind of relationship that managerial team has with the people on the floor. I've been in jobs where there's been good relationships and people are like, well, I managers and like, Bob or whoever, like, I know that they've got our back. And then, I've worked at other jobs where they've been like, well, Ted is... you can't trust that guy, so I mean, the perspective of a shop hand whenever it comes in, because I mean, a lot of people could be afraid, like, are you here to like learn what I do and figure out how to replace me? Like,
oh yeah, definitely. I mean, attitude and perspective, I think in any position, whether it's shop floor or not, would definitely play a hand. But I think that goes back to, if you explain to somebody why you're doing it, they are 10 times more likely going to help you.
Right.
In your initiative. So I think if they just know the background and the reasoning, I think that's with any of us. Like I said, in any position, you're more likely to jump on board instead of going in blindly.
Absolutely.
And even specifically, you know, when you're engaging them, right? So if we're going to go onto the shop floor and we're going to work in an area, right? You have to involve the people that are performing the work because they know it better and they know the problems. And problems are opportunities. And so if you engage them quickly and you find out what their pain points are and you solve them, I mean, they're going to come back again and again and again because you fixed the issue that they were struggling the most with. And so then every time they have another issue, they're going to be, hey, I need your help, right?
Yeah. Hey, I remember you. Come over here.
You know, it comes to the point where, you know, you might push it a little bit, but then they start to pull you, right? They're like, this works, and I see you care, and you're making a difference, right? And so it's like, the next time I need someone to do that, you know, I'm going to call you.
So definitely it seems like there's, you know, building those relationships and trust and understanding and just really respect in general. There's a lot of value in that. Which leads me to the next question to both of you. What is value to you, and what do you value?
Probably both of our definitions of value might be a little bit different, but at the end of the day, we'll kind of evolve to the same value creation per se. But, you know, from my aspect and more of the numbers crunching data, where can we go to really find that value? I mean, value to me is how do we make something better? Is it either we make it better financially? Are there more opportunities? Or can we make something better like via the working environment or the building, etc.?
What about you, Alicia?
Well, I would agree with Jordan, what her definition of value is. And I would just add to it, you know, when I think also of value, I think about, you know, value is also, you know, when you're able to take like a raw product and through processes and these kinds of things, right, you're able to morph that, right, into, you know, a product, right? And the value, it has value because of what you're doing to the material, but it also has value because a consumer's going to pay for it.
Right. Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And honestly, it's actually where Jordan's definition and mine kind of collide is where it becomes real optimal in operations, right? Because what you want to do is you want to be able to convert raw material into a finished product, right?
Yeah.
At the most cost-efficient way, right? Because there's only a specific amount of money a customer is going to pay for a product. And if you have lots of waste in your process, that means that your chance for profit is really slim. And so it's a good balance, and you need to have value in the manufacturing process. So then the value that you sell the product to for your customer, you can keep some of those profits for yourself.
So who would you say is responsible for creating value, and how would they create it? Does it start on the shop floor? Is it something that management brings to the team? Like, everyone
contributes to value, you know.
It can come from anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you know, value should be something that you're considering when you're designing a product and designing a process, right? To the point of when you're actually manufacturing it. And then every activity you do after you've launched it, right? Whether I'm keeping an eye on the cost of material and do I need to, you know, negotiate with my vendors to get a better material price, or you know, if things like inflation, which has been a big topic these last, you know, year or so.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like meaning maybe I have to go back and, you know, I can no longer manufacture it at a cost that I once did. And that value needs to change in what you sell it to your customer for.
So breaking all of that down, and the importance of that kind of comes into play with like everything, whether that's retaining personnel, whether that's profitability, whether that is the actual production of materials. How can management use it? How can they use it to help their gain?
Some things that they can do is explain to them, you know, the big picture. You know, if I'm coming in every day and I'm making widgets, and I don't know the importance of what this widget is and where it ends up, you know, I don't really find a lot of purpose in the work that I'm doing. You know, but if I'm coming in and I recognize that the product that I'm building, one piece at a time, goes into construct a bridge or goes into an engine of a car, and without this, the engine isn't going to run, right? You can kind of be able to educate them so that they see the bigger picture and what their contributions are actually making.
I gotcha. Would you say then that the value, like an understanding from employees as well as management, seeing like, oh, okay, like taking pride in what we do and profitability and so on and so forth, would you say that that would play a role in employee retention?
Yeah, I mean, an employee who knows what they're doing and what their contribution is making, I think does. Also, when we're talking about value, right, you have to value your employees, right? And those things that value employees are like you paying them a fair wage and, not making them work 7 days a week, right? Ridiculous overtime, right? And not denying vacation, So there's a lot of things that you can convey to your employees that they are valuable. That's just as important, for retention.
So given your experiences in the managerial fields throughout the years, have you noticed that like different relationships provide different types of value? Like as far as like if you're on like a first name basis and you're like, oh, hey, Janet, Jimmy, or whoever, just like, hey, how was your weekend? Like taking the time to get to know people versus just, hey, how you doing?
I mean, absolutely, right? Like, right. I mean, if you're not building relationships, there's not a two-way conversation happening, right? And so people are not going to feel open to come talk to you about good things or about bad things, right? So there's pretty much just a wall that, that needs to be broken down.
What would you say the importance of stability goes for anybody who's working in their fields?
Well, I think it's incredibly important, and I think probably COVID didn't help with it, right? Because that created a lot of instability, right? With jobs and job markets. I mean, Jordan was talking about, recruiting, as a financial recruiter, and then now all of a sudden having to find work, right? So, people want a job, that's stable, right? That means that, as long as I want to have this job, that I can come in and I can work every day at this job. They also want to make sure that the position in there is going to remain pretty stable as well, right? So if I'm coming in every day and I have a new assignment and I'm being yanked around, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and I don't know what I'm doing, I'm uncomfortable, right? Because when things are not stable, I mean, people are really uncomfortable, right? It's like, I'm uncomfortable here, I'm scared, and maybe I'm afraid, right? No. Of failing, whatever it is. And so the more stability we can offer, the more comfortable people are working in an environment like that.
Yeah, and really, I mean, value can add more stability to a company and an individual's job security. So if we can add value and really optimize what we're doing on a manufacturing floor, to Alicia's point earlier, that's just more money in the company's pocket, which then, if we can beef up more of the balance sheet or just have that kind of financial cushion there, then that enables the company to do more maybe capital expenditure activities down the road, or build out, a break room or something for the employee, and just make sure that they have a job to come to year over year if they want to go.
So, would you say that growth for a company and stability go hand in hand, or would you say that you kind of have to break loose some of that stability in order to grow? Like, what have your experiences taught you?
Yeah, I mean, growth is, everybody wants growth.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the right kind of growth.
Yeah, and if you're not stable, that is a bumpy ride. Like,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, because when something is stable, then I can do more of it, right? And I can consistently have results. But if I don't know, if one day I can make 100 parts and the next day I can make 500, right? How am I going to go to make 1,000, right? Because there's a lot of variability, right, in there. And so, when things are stable, it's easier to turn it up a notch. I mean, we can grow the business because we already know the output and what the process will give us. If it's not stable, that becomes a pretty rocky climb.
Have either of you ever worked for a company that was stable and then transitioned into a period of instability, I should say, and noticed anything, like learned any lesson, like, oh wow, actually that instability was able to allow us to try something new or to try something dynamic that kind of like broke the mold, sort of speak?
Not really from a manufacturing aspect on my end. I don't know about you, Alicia, but
normally instability comes from, in my opinion, a lot of lack of planning, or not getting the things implemented in a time frame that needed, right? So, I mentioned I was a program manager, right? And so, if you don't have enough capacity on a shared piece of equipment and you're selling more work than you can produce out of it, well, that's a problem. You're not going to be able to do that, and it's going to impact the customer. If I need another line, but I waited too long to kick that off, and there's a 12-month lead time, and I'm going into production in 9 months, right? that means that the equipment isn't going to be in or even close to being, installed until 3 months after I need to start making parts. And so, a lot of the instability that I see actually is because management doesn't make timely decisions or the right decisions, or prior planning.
I'm really curious, knowing both of your perspectives and now hearing both of you define value and the importance of stability. When we go to all of these portcos, whenever we're filming and we're interviewing people, we'll interview different women on the shop floor, and we'll always ask them the same question, which is, how does it feel, and how do you feel in the process of working here, being a woman, when we typically go to these portcos and there's mostly men working, and we always get the same answer, which is like, it's not a big deal. I mean, we're just here to work. So I'm curious to know both of your perspectives, being women in the manufacturing field, and if you've faced any sort of adversity because of that, or...
I don't see myself, as different than anybody else that works in manufacturing or has that experience. It's just, I'm one of the team kind of aspect. I have never felt that there's a real female male kind of differentiator there.
I got you.
I would agree 100%. And there's actually a lot more women in manufacturing now than when I started. But it was never something that, I felt like I was in an adverse situation because of. In fact, I think the reason that there's not as many women in manufacturing isn't because it's not welcoming to women. I just think that a lot of women think that manufacturing is dirty and unsafe and hard labor, long hours, right? And so I think manufacturing has kind of gotten a really bad reputation, and certainly there are companies out there that would fall into all of those categories, right? But I would say there's a lot more that do not, and they are really great ways to make a really good living, and provide for a family, and they're very conducive for women to work at.
Was there ever a time that either of you faced adversity and found a way to overcome that? I know that you said that typically, you're just part of the team, but was there ever a time throughout your career that you were like, well, shit, this sucks, like how am I gonna figure out a way to maneuver through that?
I think for me most recently, and I'm still kind of going through it now and trying to figure out my career workload with being a new mom. I have a 7-month-old at home now, and so not only having a newborn and going through that life experience has been amazing, and now I'm really seeing not only a female in manufacturing but a female mother in manufacturing in challenging industry, and it's trying to figure out how do I stay on my current career path and also be a full-time mom. So still working through that adversity there, but I'm figuring out slowly but surely.
What about you, Alicia?
I would say from adversity, especially, I don't know if we're talking still about, being a woman, I would say, I don't feel that I had a lot of adversity because of being a woman, but I did work in 2 German companies, right? So almost 20 years of my life was in a German company. And I would say that, the Germans are special, right? They're incredibly smart. They're incredibly directive. I had to learn, to get some thick skin for sure, right? Because, they don't give you a hard time and then give you a teddy bear and tell you to go have a good day. And so that adversity was just probably a difference in culture. And, I would think, I shouldn't probably say this, but sometimes Germans look at other non-Germans, like Americans, right, a little differently than they look at their German colleagues. And I would say that you can get in for sure by building some credibility, being trustworthy, and being competent at your job, which I was able to establish in both of those. But the adversity was just trying to, make a name for yourself and being someone that was reliable. So, once you got there and you were in and they knew, what you're doing, you're competent, we can trust her with big projects, then they give you more. But the adversity was probably more that than, ever because I was a woman.
So what would you say for somebody who's listening to this right now and, they're like, I'm stuck in my career because I'm dealing with X, Y, or Z. What would you tell someone who is struggling with adversity at their current position now?
Well, I mean, if you're in a really bad position, where there's like, people are doing things that are just wrong. But adversity is everywhere. And, you're not ever going to find a place that's perfect and that is happy and life is easy. And if that's what you're looking for, you might be able to find it, but you're not going to get very far. I mean, where you build your experiences, where you become an expert at doing things, is because you have to do the hard things, right? I mean, you have crisis, you have problems, you got to work through it. And you will learn so much more going through those kinds of circumstances than you ever will because I come in every day, my job is easy, I know what I'm doing. So I think adversity actually builds you into the person that you become.
And sets you up for further career growth.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it allows you to also be a better leader, right? So, I mean, I had a lot of really great leaders, but I had some that weren't so great. And I probably learned just as much from them as I did from the good ones because I recognized during that time and looking back that is not the kind of leader I want to be. And so because I had that experience, I was able to make a difference. Had I not had that experience, who knows, maybe I would have turned out to be similar. I don't know, right? But I mean, it's, you can't quit because it's hard. Otherwise, you're going to be quitting all the time,
Right.
Stick with it and push through it. And the nice thing is when you're facing adversity, that if you keep on going, you get through it.
So I 100% agree with you. It definitely comes to just resiliency and being able to push through and knowing that hard work and dedication will pay off, without a doubt. Learning the value and stability for someone who's in those spots like you did, you found value in those lessons. You found value in poor management just as well as you did with good management because you were able to say, "Oh, that's awesome. I love the way that they did that," or "Oh my God, can you believe that?" Okay, we're going to write that down really quick. Not going to do that. So, we've talked about value. We've talked about stability. I'm really curious, how do value and stability go hand in hand at this point?
I mean, really, how does value and stability go hand in hand? I mean, if we can create value at the end of the day and improve the business in any aspect, financially, become stronger or more resilient against market conditions, recessions, the next COVID, anything like that, if we can create value and just really build a stronger business at the end of the day, that business, it should be around for years to come, which then gives more stability not only to that industry, the products that we're making, but also employee security as well.
So what would you say because I'm sure there's somebody out there who's listening to this in management and is like, well, it's a product and that's all we need to make is this product and then that's what we'll do. So what would you say
I like the tone.
Yeah. What would you say specifically to those managers out there in those positions who are like, well, the people who are like, well, where's your data? How are you going to back that up? What would you say?
Well, hopefully we have the data. We should. So typically, our very first go-to, if we are trying to create value with anything that we're doing, specifically here at MiddleGround, when we're going to acquire a company, we go through and dig through the data. We dig through the financials, any kind of reports that the company can provide, whether it's like their income statement, their balance sheet, their inventory, anything like that really gives us a good baseline for even just how the company's performing. What is that company doing well? What is the company not doing well, or what are they doing okay on? Looking at all of the aspects. So that is, like I said, the first step when even trying to figure out where can we even go get the value. So for example, if we're looking at a new portfolio company that we're looking to bring on board, one of the first things I'm going to go look at is their balance sheet and go look at their inventory dollars on their balance sheet or their accounts payable, accounts receivable. One quick note, if their accounts payable is far less than their accounts receivable, then that means that we are paying our vendors faster than we're receiving money in.
Oh, okay.
So if it makes sense to you, if we're sending out cash faster than we're actually receiving it in, there's a cash discrepancy there.
Yeah, that's a bit of an issue.
So if you even just something simple like that, flip-flopping it, you kind of get a cash pickup there. Well, how is that important? Well, if you have more cash in your pocket, day in and day out, you can do more things with that cash instead of it being in someone else's pockets and we're waiting for it.
You know, we were talking earlier, and you mentioned to me the 80 versus 20 argument and the Pareto principle. What is it, and how does it tie in with this specifically?
Alicia?
Yeah, so the Pareto principle is something that is used when you're looking at data. And pretty much what that means is that 80% of the consequences are generally caused by like 20% of the issues, right? Anytime you're looking at an issue, we'll talk about like shop floor KPIs. You know, you're talking about downtime, or you're talking about scrap, or something along those lines. You look at the Pareto because what you want to do is you want to group. What are the issues, right? Or what are the causes? And by looking at them, you can focus, because what you want to do is you want to focus on the biggest issues, right? You want to make the biggest gains possible with the resources that you have to throw at a problem, right?
Yeah, more.
And so, all it really does is it allows you to, really looks to, with data at a problem. And helps you hone in, where you need to focus.
Yeah, definitely. Everybody wants more bang for their buck. Absolutely.
Yeah, and there are people who can really get into the data, right? And they want to, Pareto something out, to the 10th degree, right? But the issue is that there's also a point, when you have a line or a process, right? And if you can fix 80% of the problem, right? There are people who want to go after that next 20%, but I would challenge, stop at the 80%. There's probably another line that if you attack the 80% of that line, right, and then move to the next and to the next to the next, what you really want is the big wins, right? And usually that happens, the big wins, which is 80%, usually happens by attacking some small ones that makes up the 20%.
I got it. So, how would you say that building relationships across the board would affect that? Because I know that there are a lot of people, like I said, the voice earlier, it's a product, whatever. And then people are moving on with that and just looking at the dollar sign. How would you say that relationships would really affect those numbers?
Well, I think relationships really come from, people working together. And I think if you're talking about data and going after improvements, like specifically using like the Pareto principle, right? You would probably put a team around it. And if you can get to understand the problem with data, right? You know that you're working on the right thing. You know that the team's focused on the right thing. And then you actually can bring change.
So I 100% agree. So would you say that portcos in general could afford to make these changes and working on improvements at the expense of the workers?
Oh, well, no, I wouldn't say that.
Yeah, no.
I wouldn't say that. Our portfolio companies are very data driven, right? So they are looking at things like the Pareto and statistics and those kinds of things to identify the issues and work on the right problems. But I would say the result of working on those actually makes it much better for the employee, right? So they're not getting it on their backs, but they're trying to do is use that to make improvements that make a better workplace to work in, right? To make their day easier when they come in, and then so that they can go home. Working
in these spots, how do you know that the portcos or these various companies aren't doing this, like ripping off employees or putting them in dangerous spots or whatever? What are the protocols, and how do you set about finding out and investigating and making sure that doesn't happen?
So that's a really good question. So what I would tell you is that at least the portfolio companies that I support regularly are doing employees engagement surveys. And what these surveys are they're they're anonymously, they can submit information that tells you those kinds of things about what's happening in the operations and what's happening overall in the company. And so those things are shared. Nothing is ever perfect, right? There's always problems. But at the end of the day, if we know about them, we should be driving improvements in those areas. And so we do not make it, our aim to do anything on the back of the employees. What we want to do is we want to create a work environment that, creates longevity in the role, that employees want to come to work in there and are proud of the work that they do. And so we don't mess around. If we believe that there's management in place that are doing things to employees that are not okay, we're not going to wait around for that. We will remove them immediately. And for the longer term, I guess more cultural issues that might be problematic for employees. The employee engagement is one lever that we can pull, and really helping them to identify it. And if we need coaching, we need programs, whatever is needed to improve that area. Those are the things that we would focus on. Because one of our core values, right, is leaving things better than you found it. And when we're talking about that, we're specifically talking about the employees.
I'm so glad that you said that. What is the importance of leaving a business better than you found it?
Well, at the end of the day, we spend a ton of time. I'm gone 4 or 5 days a week from my family. And I want to make sure that the work that I do makes a difference.
Yeah, and I think it's the backbone of kind of what, MiddleGround and even the operations. It's the backbone of what we do and what we try to do. Yeah. Most of the time we go in not to try to create value just to put, more money in our pockets, but it's really, we do care about the individuals across all levels. Yep. And we will create value not just because it's a cost saving. Sometimes it's an incremental cost, but we know it's the right thing to do. If there are certain departments that they're just too lean, we'll make sure that we're adding the right headcount to make sure that they are staffed to the appropriate levels to where we want them to be able to take their business at the end of the day. We want the company to grow, but we need to make sure we have the right individuals in place to do it. So it doesn't always mean just cost cutting. It truly means look at value, no matter whether it's additive or kind of improvements. So,
well, that's it's been so good sitting and talking to both of you today and hearing your perspectives based off of your experiences, what you've seen out in the field, what you've learned about, and just really understanding and really getting a chance to pick your brain. So thank you both so much for coming out today.
Yeah, of course.
Really appreciate it. Thank you all so much for listening to the second episode of Executive Sessions. I'd like to give a big thanks to our guest today, Alicia Motomura and Jordan Gabbert, the rock and roll team here at MiddleGround Capital, and a big thanks to Clark Freeman and John Stewart II. You can't see them, but they are behind the camera and behind making all of this come to life. Thank you all so much, and join us next time when I sit down with John Stewart Sr. and Tyler May you'll just have to tune in to hear it. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much.